Hi, my name is Dr. Ruwan Jayatunge, and today I would like to do my presentation on stress management and mental well-being. So I worked as a medical doctor and I have special interest in psychology, and I did my psychology degree at York University. And recently I completed my PhD in psychology. So I would like to share my knowledge and experience with you. To start with, today's presentation is based on one of my books. It's Stress Management, which I wrote in 2003 and published by Godagi International Publishers. So the today's topic, what is stress? So there are various definitions of stress. Basically, stress can be defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. And this is the Oxford Dictionary definition. The word stress is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a state of affair involving demand on physical or mental energy, which can disturb the normal physiological and psychological functioning of an individual. So what is mental well-being? Mental well-being in general is the state of thriving in various areas of life. Like we know that if you take a person, the person has the biological self and the social self and the economic side. So there are various phases to each person. And when we function as an individual, so we have to deal with all these fractions. So our social life, our economic life, our biological life, with our relationships at work, play, etc. So we face ups and downs, and we have to maintain a fruitful, optimal level. So if you can maintain an optimal level, so you have a very good mental well-being. But that balance being sort of disrupted, people go into high stresses and experience various types of psychological ailments. So when you consider calm mind, you can see this person, he's relaxing, he's in front of an ocean. So he sees the blue sky and he is focused. He's focused to the present moment. He's not time traveling. He's not thinking about the past. He's not thinking about the future. So he is right here. He's focused to the present moment. So whereas this person is highly stressed, his mind is sort of like a roller coaster, is shifting here and there, he's time traveling, it goes back and forth. So he thinks about past, he thinks about his future, he's not connected to the present moment. So his mind becomes vulnerable at that time, and especially stress, anxiety, depression can hound him. So how to get normal physiological and psychological functioning? Because we live in an industrialized world, and the contemporary world, we have a lot of stresses stemming from our biology, coming from our culture, it's coming from the economic conditions and the cultural factors. So we have to balance our minds facing these different stress factors. It's very important to maintain a homeostasis. The homeostasis is the inclination of the human body to seek as well as maintain balance, stability, and equilibrium so that it's functioning at an optimal level. As I mentioned, there are hundreds of definitions for stress. So stress is a state of tension that is created when a person responds to the demands and pressures that come from work, family, and other external sources. So here we see the stresses are coming from external factors, but also the stress can come from the internal factors, because in an individual, he's constantly in a sort of tense situation, because constantly he has a battle inside his mind. So sometimes we have self-imposed demands, obligations, and sometimes we are very critical about ourselves. So we want to be perfectionists. So we impose a lot of burden to ourselves. So invariably, the stresses can come from inside, from our body, from our biological system. So psychological stresses are social and physical environmental circumstances that challenge the adaptive capabilities and resources of an organism. So as kids in 80s, this is how we dealt with stresses, because there was no specific stress outlets as school children. So children, when they were affected by the stresses, so they became agitated, and some were punished by the teachers, and there was no proper way of diagnosing stresses and anxieties in school children. So Sigmund Freud, he profoundly studied about stress. He studied about trauma-related stresses, which he called traumatic neurosis. And he studied in depth, and Freud pointed out that if a psychic energy is unable to meet its original objective, it fixes upon an alternative. This impulse leads to sublimation. It can also lead to stresses. So basically, stress can be defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response that prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. So being stressed is a very human thing. As a human being, we face a lot of stresses. As I stated earlier, it comes from outside world and also your internal system. So you are pressurized from outside and within. So as a human being, you have to maintain your homeostasis. You have to maintain your balance. Stress starts in utero. I mean, in the embryonic state, we experience stress, but we don't have any recollection of that difficult time period, because when we were inside the uterus as an embryo, we experienced maternal stresses. And research has indicated that if when mother experiences stress and anxiety, it affects the fetus. So impact of maternal stress, depression, and anxiety on fetal neurobehavioral development. And children, when they endure stresses when they were in utero after their birth, it can affect in their the future life, because stresses are powerful, because it can change your psychological makeup. So stress is not always bad, because stress is being there since our early days and throughout human evolution. It came after us. So without stress, if we did not respond to stresses and we just accepted whatever the conditions we faced in early days, we would have been a caveman. We evolved, we acquired certain human progress, because we were able to face stresses, and we reacted positively, and we created certain measures to evade stresses. So that's how the human progression started climbing up. Some people say that I need a stress-free life. It's not impossible, but it's little tough to get a stress-free life. So sometimes I say, like, if you really want to see people without stresses, go to a cemetery. The people who are sleeping there, they don't face any stresses, and they have a stress-free life. But I don't know whether there's afterlife, there's reincarnation. So if it's so, and it's a sort of terrible situation, because we have to face stresses not only in this life but next life after. So next life too, we had to face the same stresses that we experience in our present life. So that's something scary. So what are the major types of stresses? The frustration, because people face failures. We are not always winners. Sometimes we lose things. Sometimes we face academic failures, work-related failures, in our relationships, in our day-to-day lives. Uh, uh, we face certain failures, and it leads to frustration. Sometimes a conflict also can cause a tension in us. For instance, uh, your girlfriend invites you to her birthday, and your classmates, they have organized a wild party. So you don't know where to go. Now, if you go to your girlfriend's birthday, you're gonna lose your friends, because your friends are gonna have a nice time. They're going to do to have this great party. But if you go with your friends, then your girlfriend, she gets mad at you. So naturally, this conflict occurs. So change in our lives, like life changes are certain alterations, and it affects it affects us. It affects living circumstances. For instance, you have to relocate, you have to change your workplace. So any change, like it comes with certain challenges. So change also leads to stress and sometimes pressure. As a student, you know that you have exams and you have deadlines, and as university students, you understand that you have deadlines too. And if you are an employee, you have certain deadlines, you are under pressure, you have to fulfill certain workplace obligations. So when you are under pressure, the tension rises and your stress level goes up. Stress is not always bad. Stress is a good servant, but a bad master. So, as I mentioned earlier, because of stress factors, we wanted to eliminate stress. We want to overcome stress. That's why once we being a caveman and underdeveloped hunter-gatherers, from that life, we came to this today, the vast development, industrial atomic space age, because we faced and we dealt with this environmental stresses. But when stress is overwhelming, and if we are unable to control it, it affects us badly, because stress is a silent killer when it's not controlled. So sometimes high stress can cause physiological, psychological changes in your system, and people become vulnerable to stresses. So uncontrolled stress can ruin a person completely. It can change his vital systems, including the immune system, making him more vulnerable. So stress can affect our body, especially our vital organs. So stress and socio-economic development, it goes hand in hand. And I would like to tell a story here. Long time ago, this occurred some millions of years ago, when we were hunter-gatherers. There were two perfect warriors, warrior A and warrior B. Warrior A, he was a very brave person, and he was a perfect warrior. And hunter B was a warrior too, but he was not a risk taker. Sometimes stress and anxiety affects him. When he's under stress and anxiety, he tries to sort of retreat. So once they went for hunting and saw a lion. So being a brave guy, the hunter A did not dare to fight the lion, and he went forward. And unfortunately, he was eaten by the lion. So whereas hunter B, who was not a risk taker like you and me, started running, and eventually he was able to save his life. So we are the offspring. So we come from the hunter B. We have hunter B's DNA. We have his all the biological components. So invariably, we are more susceptible, and we are sort of prone to stresses, and under stress conditions, we get overwhelmed. So we face routine stresses. When you function as a person, as a student or an employee, you have to fulfill your duties, and also you have financial responsibilities. So you face day-to-day routine stresses, like when you wake up, you go to work, and the public transportation. So if there's traffic jam, so those things are routine stresses, like small stresses that we experience. But there are sudden disruptive changes, like death of a family member, and if a family member or you yourself fall sick, and having a terminal illness. So those are very, very disruptive changes in our lives. And also there are traumatic stresses, big stresses, which can occur due to extreme trauma as a result of severe accident, an assault, an environmental disaster, or war. So as Sri Lankans, we face a 30-year destructive war. That was a man-made disaster. So not only soldiers, even civilians, and became the collateral, it caused collateral damage in them. So the combatants, paramilitary, and even the civilians were affected by combat trauma, combat stress. So in 2004 tsunami, environmental issue, environmental catastrophe. So it caused huge stresses in us. And also for the last 70, 80 years, our society faced numerous social upheavals, like racial violence, and political violence, and all these social upheavals affected us. So when you talk about stresses, mainly we can say that it's we have distresses, negative stresses, and eustressors. Eustressors are called positive stresses. For instance, let's say you get a scholarship. Now you have to go to England, or now you have to go to Australia to further your education. So you are happy. You're happy about your achievement. Also, you are excited, and also it generates certain type of stress, like you get a promotion. So now you have different obligations, but you are happy. Also, you are excited. But again, with that promotion, it comes certain obligations, responsibilities. So that's also can cause certain changes in your mindset. So these stresses are like negative trait, and it can cause anxiety. Sometimes people become procrastinators. They postpone their duties. Sometimes they sort of neglect their work. And with stresses, we experience positive challenge, excitement, motivation, enhancement, etc. So these are the common major life events that can trigger stresses, which include job issues or retirement, because a lot of people experience work-related stresses. Stresses come from your superiors, stresses come from your co-workers, harassments, injustices at your workplace. Sometimes you are affected by financial stress, lack of money, and then you are worried how to feed your family, how to pay rent. If a death of a family member or a friend, even a pet, it causes a lot of disturbances inside you, and it can cause trauma as well as severe stress. Sometimes family problems, family tension, maybe marital issues, sometimes problem with the children, sometimes in-laws. So it leads to a lot of stresses, sudden illness and hospitalization also can cause stress. And if you have to relocate, if you have to move, then again you have to face some disturbing. You have to face this disturbing atmosphere, and it sometimes people are affected by relationship problems, with the marital problems, and sometimes they have to uh, uh, face divorce, etc. When stresses are happening inside our system, so our biological makeup changes. There are several chemicals, several hormones are activating in our system. So especially norepinephrine and cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and when a person is under stress, his cortisol level goes up. When high stress affects a person, there are early signs, early warning signs, uh, especially they get tension headache, difficulty in their sleep, changes in their sleeping pattern, sometimes chest pain, heart tension, muscle tension, and sometimes loss of libido and weight gain, or sometimes weight loss. So this picture shows how cortisol can affect a person. This picture is about one Red Army soldier in 1941, and then in 1945, he faced combat trauma when the Nazi Germany invaded Russia. He had to defend his motherland. So several years he was in the battlefield, and he experienced gruesome battle events. Even though he was physically unharmed, he did not sustain any injury, but these stresses affected his psyche. So you can see the changes in his skin color, his eyes, his hair. So how a person, how stress can consume a person big time. So there are a number of emotional reactions to stresses. Sometimes people get angry, they get very irritated. You can see road rage, especially in a traffic jam. So sometimes people can't handle stress and they go into sort of anger related issues, sometimes hostility. The burnout is very important because people, especially it happens with workaholics. People work for years. They are hardworking people, and all of a sudden they go into limbo, and they find themselves in a sort of a blind alley that they feel that they are checkmate. So they have no energy to function. They feel that now they are exhausted, and burnout. When they face burnout, it's a huge problem, especially with the workers. Sometimes school children, they experience burnout. And when a person is highly stressed, he has concentration issues. He's unable to concentrate because his mind is sort of like a pendulum, going here and there, going back and forth. He time travels. He's dwelling in the past. He thinks about the past issues, and all of a sudden he comes to the future. Then he has fear feelings, and he has uh, anxiety. He's worried about future. With stress, it affects your physical body, especially fatigue. And the end of the day, you feel that you have no energy. Like you feel you have muscle pain, these tension headache, and it's like a sort of general fatigue. And when people are under stress, they have a feeling of insecurity. They are worried about their situation. They are worried about themselves. They're worried about their family, their children, their loved ones, because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And if the things go into haywire, that they won't be able to cope up with that. So sometimes uh, anticipatory anxiety and the fear factors constantly affect them. Under stress, people forget things. This often happen with school children, because when they face exam stress, academic stress, uh, they forget their academic stuff. When they go to exam, sometimes they go blank, and they can't recall what they studied. Sometimes irritability. We spoke about anger, and also sometimes people become very irritated. They have a very negative mood, and they are not sort of not having any form of humor, and anything can provoke them, and they go into negativity. Sometimes they do not associate their friends or co-workers, and they try to go into isolation and restlessness. They are not relaxed. Even though they go to sleep, they are unable to sleep. Sometimes the entire night they are awake because of this restlessness feature. So, what are the physical symptoms of stress? So, we mentioned aches and pains, muscle tension, muscle pain, headaches, and tension headaches, chest pain, and heart pounding, exhaustion, trouble sleeping, dizziness, and it can cause high blood pressure. Your blood pressure can go up because of ongoing stresses. Sometimes they have a stomach problem and digestive problem, nausea, vomiting, and lack of appetite, and trouble with libido, and it affects their marital relationship, and eventually it can lead to weak immune system. The person becomes vulnerable, so any viral infection, bacterial infection can hit him. So what are the cognitive symptoms of stress? They have memory problems, inability to concentrate, poor judgment, because when the person is under high stress and anxiety, his inside is obscured. He can't see properly. He can't take a proper judgment. He can't decide and take decisions. Sometimes when people are under stress, they see only the negative side. They become so pessimistic. Everything they think that whatever I do, it's gonna be a disaster. So they they go into this mental loop, this negative thinking pattern, and they go into sort of negative fantasies, and they have racing thoughts, fear, insecurity, and they are in a constant worrying situation. So when these emotional symptoms uh, going to take place for a long time. They go into depression or general unhappiness. Sometimes they can experience anxiety, change in their mood, irritability, and some feel overwhelmed. And certain percentage of people, when they experience high stress, they go into isolation. Especially alienation is a marked feature in stress, as sometimes in post-traumatic stress disorder. When people are experiencing high form of stress, they go into social isolation. They try not to associate anybody. They shut down. And also other mental and emotional health problems are going hand in hand with high stresses. So we discussed about burnout. It's a symptom. It's resulting from chronic workplace stresses. Uh, because if these stresses are not properly managed, the workers can experience burnout, and it's bad for the organization, because then a lot of it can cause financial mishaps or financial problems. When people are under stress, they go into stress producing thoughts, because the way they think can affect their stress factors. Sometimes they have negative automatic thoughts, and they made negative assumptions, and they have erroneous core beliefs. So their thinking pattern, sometimes they perceive world as a very dangerous entity. My boss is a nasty guy. He's gonna reprimand me. Now this everybody is behind my back, and I'm being punished. I'm vulnerable. I'm unable to do that. I'm unable to perform. I'm a failure. So naturally, these negative automatic thoughts are coming as a sort of a vicious cycle. And day by day, minute by minute, the person is overwhelmed, and eventually he goes into severe form of stress. So, what are the common internal causes of stress? That's pessimism, because negative outlook. If you wear a red glasses, red spectacles, you see the entire world in red. If you use a green color spectacles, you see the entire world in green. So some people have black and white thinking, either my way or highway. So this when people are pessimistic, they see the negative side. Their own interpretation is negative. Any social change, any change in the outer environment, they perceive as a threat. Sometimes they are only. Sometimes a good thing happens, but they don't see the good side. They always see the negative side because of their highly pronounced pessimism. Some people cannot accept uncertainty when they are under stress. They obviously face fear and anxiety when the outer atmosphere is sort of not constant and subject to be changed. They cannot accept that. So when there's an uncertainty, their tension is building up. Some people are rigid thinkers, and they always have lack of flexibility. So these people are prone to stresses because they don't change their mental attitude. Sometimes they always have this rigid thinking pattern, and they want things happen according to their own way. I have seen in certain families, like parents, they want like their children to do what they want, take the decisions that what the father wants. If the children wants to take their own decisions, sometimes the father gets upset because they have unrealistic expectations. And some people are perfectionists because they practice perfectionism. So you have to be the number one. You have to be the shining example. And you always climb for the stars. But the life is up and down. Sometimes you have to face failures and rejections. You have to um, psychologically tune yourself for failures and any type of rejections. When people are not geared to accept such things, uh, sometimes it ends up in a disaster. Some people could go into suicide or self-harm. So when people have all or nothing attitude, they become very, very rigid, and they become easy prey for stresses. When stress hits a person, he or she goes into negative stress coping methods. So what are the negative stress coping methods? Sometimes drinking alcohol too much because they drink to forget their present worry, and they want to numb and sort of get away from the problem or tension or stress. Sometimes tobacco addiction, heavy smoking, gambling. Even though in Sri Lankan culture, gambling is not very much pronounced. I have seen people in Atlantic City and in Las Vegas, how they engage in gambling from morning till evening and losing money, but still they have this urge for this gambling because it gives sort of stress releasing thought, and they chase that. Some people go into different eating habits, sometimes overeating, and sometimes they have anorexia, bulimia. I remember one time I spoke to a person who was affected by compulsive eating in order to evade his stresses. So he says, when I'm eating, when I'm consuming food, I feel great because food doesn't judge me. So the person, when he's consuming food, he gets this thrill. So he gets sort of energy to fight back. So this is a negative stress coping method. And some people go into compulsive sex addiction, shopping or internet browsing, and using drugs like smoking cannabis and use doing drugs like heroin, crystal meth, and other types of drugs. In each culture, they have different types of drugs. And when I talk about cannabis, actually, there's a controversy. So I'm not going to talk about that. So some consider it as a medication, some consider as an illicit drug. So in fact, I'm going to do a discussion with Dr. Manoj Fernando. So in that presentation, you can hear what are the new research about cannabis and whether it has to be legalized, whether it's a good medication or it's sort of illegal, it's sort of affecting developing brains. So we'll wait for that. So I'm not going to talk about cannabis at this time. So I want to tell a story about stress transformation because if I try to be more technical, you may not understand. So I'm using very simple words and simple example. So there was a worker. He was working hard, and once in a way he makes blunders. So one day he made a blunder, and his superior, his boss, reprimanded him and scolded him for nearly half an hour. So now he had to take these blows from his superior, and he didn't have. There was a vast power difference. You understand the power dynamics in a workplace. So your boss is high. When he shouts at you, you can't talk back to him. So you had to keep your head down and listen to him. So this person was highly stressed at workplace because he had a bad day with the boss. Then the evening he comes home and he's overwhelmed, he's upset, he's sad, he's angry. So when he comes home, he wants he immediately wants a cup of tea, but his wife is preparing food. Then he gets angry. Now he's wants to now the stress transformation is happening. Now he's transforming his stress factors to his wife. Now he's shouting at his wife and telling all the negative things. So this wife is sort of a traditional wife, and she doesn't talk back and sort of not uh, high reactive type. So she takes all this negativity from the husband. Now she's upset. Now she thinks the entire day, I work for these people, I prepare food, I clean their house, but eventually what I get, all these the scoldings, he's shouting at me, he's yelling at me, this is unreasonable. Then his wife goes to the son's room. So son is a teenager. Instead of studying, this guy plays video games, either GTA or Call of Duty or whatever. And he's having a good time. So mother comes into his room and she sees that this kid is playing video games. She yells at him, say that you're not studying, you're always playing video games, you're wasting your time. So she tells him everything, every negative thing. And all of a sudden, the kid gets this the blast from his mother. So he's thinking, what's happening? What's wrong with this woman? Now the kid is angry. Now what happens is from uh, father, it's being transformed to mother, mother to the kid. Now the kid is angry, so he kicks the dog. Now the innocent dog, this nice German Shepherd, he got the kick, and now the dog gets angry and he goes out. He sees a cat and he kills the cat. So this is where the story begins. Who killed the cat? So the who killed the cat gives the tells us about a nice analogy about stress transformation. And we must know that stress can cause severe complications, depression, anxiety. It can trigger physical illnesses like diabetes, high blood pressure, eye problems, and it can cause low productivity. It can cause stress-related illnesses like acute stress disorder, adjustment disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. And now there's a new stress-related disorder introduced by Professor Michael Linden from the University of Berlin. It's called post-traumatic embitterment disorder. So this is also under social stress. When people are under political stress, they can get this type of generalized mass stress syndrome. So the experts, researchers indicate that stress can change the morphology of your brain because your brain structure and your brain chemistry changes when you face high stresses. So stress can damage your brain. And when a person is under high stress, it affects his kidneys. So especially the kidney function. And chronic stress can change the liver functions. Indeed, the stress can affect the heart muscle. Sometimes people get fake heart attacks when they are under severe stress. I recall one incident. That time I was an intern in Matale Hospital. That time we finished our internship and we were working as medical officers attached to the OPD. One day, a patient came with severe chest pain, and we thought that was a typical myocardial infarction, typical MI. And then we did EEG, so there were no EEG changes. And at that time, we didn't have much understanding about stress and psychology and all these stress-related symptoms. Anyhow, he was treated for the heart attack, and he was kept under observation. But later, I realized that it was a sort of a stress attack, and it was masquerading just like a myocardial infarction. And stress and immune system has a very, very intricate connection. Stress can reduce the number of natural killer cells or lymphocytes in the body and make the body vulnerable. So the person becomes susceptible when he's under stress. So stress and rapid aging, we spoke about this. So stress, when a person is exposed to prolonged stress, it damages his skin texture, elasticity, and it's a rapid aging. The aging process is being accelerated. The huge problem is stress and reproductive health, and it has become one of the unseen problems in our society, because a lot of married couples, they face, they are unable to cope up their stresses and their marital life. Sometimes men under stress, they have loss of libido, sometimes erectile dysfunction, the women, they become irritable, sometimes they have changes in their menstrual cycle. Also, it affects their biological urge, their libido. Stress can trigger psychotic disorders. I can tell you one example. When I was working with Dr. Neil Fernando, when I was attached to the Sri Lanka Army, we treated a number of combatants. So this soldier, he participated in Operation Liberation. So after 6 to 8 months' time, he was still overwhelmed. He was physically unharmed, but he witnessed some gruesome battle events. So his stress factors were sort of accumulating, and there was no outlet. So one time he started hearing helicopter sounds. So the doctors thought this was a PTSD flashback. Then he started hearing voices. Then he stated that someone is behind his back and giving him commands. So gradually, this person was getting schizophrenia symptoms, but what was his breakable point was acute stress. So stress then transformed it triggered the psychiatric illness, schizophrenia. Stresses and suicides. When you read the newspapers, you can always find, when you do the psychological autopsy, you can always find underlying factor was stress, even relationship breakup, financial problems at workplace. So everything, whatever the suicide, domestic issues, exam failures. So whenever the stress hits the person, when he's unable to cope, sometimes they tend to take their own lives. So that's why we must have proper counseling, psychotherapeutic system. But unfortunately, we don't have trained counselors. Sometimes the people who are doing counseling, they are not qualified. Some people have fake qualifications, and they give erroneous advices to the patient. Sometimes they stop medications. So it's a huge problem. I think the health ministry, the psychiatrists should look into this problem. Stress and homicides are not rare. I have seen this in the military. Sometimes soldiers, when they were overwhelmed, when they were harassed by their superiors, sometimes they commit homicides. If you could remember the word poster, this occurred in the US. So the worker went in postal, like he worked in a post office and he was fired. Then the following day, the worker came to his workplace with a Magnum 45. He started shooting his co-workers. So work-related harassments and homicides are there. I mean, it's even happened in our society. And we know that in our educational institutions, still raggings are prevailing, and it affects mental health. Sometimes it's a very, very distressing condition for some students because those who are vulnerable, those who have very weak psychological makeup, for them, it's not a very, very pleasant thing. Some people say, and some students say, oh, it was a very nice experience for me. Or either I like my raggers. I don't know whether it's a Stockholm syndrome, but some students say that, no, I was ragged and I was frightened. I was humiliated and it affected my personality, and still I have psychological scars. Some people, when they were subjected to ragging, they develop depression, anxiety, and some go into psychiatric ailments such as schizophrenia or bipolar affective disorder. And some commit suicide. So this is also a huge problem. We have to understand stress factors experienced by the university students. And we have to do health education. So can we measure the stress? Actually, stress is a very, very subjective feeling. But in 1967, Thomas and Rahi, they introduced the stress scale. So according to them, death of a spouse, it's 100 units. And divorce, it's 73. Marital separation, it's 65. Fired at work, 47. Trouble with the boss, it's 23 units. But this is sort of in these units are based on the Western culture, Western society. But when you take Southeast Asian country like Sri Lanka, sometimes these stress unit could be vary. Like for instance, you take a person in the Western world who faces divorce, and in our country, a female. So there are a lot of social pressures. There are a lot of cultural issues faced by the Sri Lankan women. So divorce could be sort of a highly stressful thing for her, not only for her, sometimes for her family. If they have unmarried, if she has unmarried sisters, for them also it's sort of, it goes against them. So we have to understand the cultural factors as well as the other sociological parameters. Here we talk about different forms of stressors, like work-related stressors. We said at the workplace there are a lot of issues, a lot of politics. Sometimes, I mean, there are nasty bosses. They are very vindictive. They take revenge, and people face a lot of work-related harassments. And domestic stresses as a spouse, as a wife or a husband. Sometimes people face problems like I remember one lady, she was doing a good job, but husband, he was diagnosed with Othello syndrome. He had this sort of factless fear, suspicion about the wife. Each time he used to suspect his wife, her movements, and it became a very unpleasant. It created a lot of domestic stress, and vice versa. Sometimes women, when they have these delusional conditions, they suspect their husbands. They always question them. So it causes a lot of marital tension and social stresses. In a society, we face a lot of social issues, and we have legal system, cultural issues. So those things can affect us. And the environmental stresses, like the bad weather, floods. So it also can cause stress. And we spoke about combat stress. So here I would like to mention when I was working with Dr. Neil Fernando at the military hospital, we screened 823 combatants who were in active duty. And we used DSM-4 criteria, and we found out of 823 soldiers, we found 54 soldiers with full-blown symptoms of PTSD. So combat stress was emerging in Sri Lanka, PTSD or the Vietnam syndrome. Earlier, our experts thought that it was an American illness, but they were wrong. So PTSD is not culture defined. In every culture, every time we saw post-traumatic stress disorder. Last year I did a presentation on combat trauma, and in this lecture, I discuss about PTSD in Sri Lanka. So combat stress is a specific stress factor that can affect the mental and physical health of the combat soldiers. So today we think that now the war is over and there are no battle stresses. I think that's a wrong idea. Even though the war is over, still these combatants are having flashbacks. They have ruminations, so still they are affected by combat stress. Not only them, their wives, their children. So this is sort of a collective trauma, and obviously it becomes a generational trauma. It goes to the next offspring. So we have to be very cautious. We have to think about that, and we have to take mental health measures according to these issues. The war ended in 2009, and I think 2015, after 3 or 4 years after the end of the war, nearly 400 soldiers committed suicide. Why did they commit suicide? There was no war. There was no battle events, but still these people had mental scars, unhealed and untreated. So it's a huge problem. If we talk about exam stress, every year, school children, university students, they experience academic stresses because unlike, I mean, the mediocres, they are okay, like they are ready to settle with any grade. And unlike the mediocres, like very bright students, they experience exam stresses because there are high expectations from their friends, from the teachers, from parents. So now the student has to fulfill those expectations. And when he goes to the exam, all of a sudden, he finds that he's unable to perform well. Or 2-3 months prior to his exam, he realizes that, I mean, things are not good. And he goes into exam stress. And a lot of children, they suffer from psychosomatic ailments, sometimes unexplainable medical symptoms, headaches, tension headaches, stomach problems, sometimes epilepsy. Sometimes we call it pseudo seizures following exam stress. I think this book I wrote in 2002, and the educational psychologist, Dr. Tilokasundari Karyasam, she helped me. So we discuss about the stresses at school. Unfortunately, still we have the traditional school system, corporal punishment, and most of our teachers have lack of knowledge in child psychology. They use harsh punishment, sometimes shaming, breaking the students' confidence. So these factors, these unwanted stresses are accumulating at school. So the education system should look into that and give appropriate training for the teachers. We spoke about work-related stresses and how it affects productivity, how it affects our economy. When uh, when there is no appropriate optimal working environment, obviously the workers are frustrated, they are upset, so you won't get a good output from them. And what happens is the chaos. So as a good employer, you have to realize these factors. As a good administrator, you have to understand your workers under you, and you have to treat them fairly. You have to understand their stresses. Not everybody is equal. Some people have different stress tolerating levels. So you have to understand their capabilities. So based on that, you have to handle them. So long hours, unfairness, lack of acknowledgement or rewards, and lack of job security, office politics affect them. In Sri Lanka, there are a lot of employees are affected by work-related stresses, and many, they live under these stresses for long years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes 2-3 decades, they live under these stresses. And eventually it manifests as a sort of a physical ailment, and end of the day the person is getting heart attacks, severe diabetes, high blood pressure, because of this stress accumulation. Have you heard of Siberian syndrome? You can't find this syndrome in medical books. This is my innovation. Siberian syndrome actually talks about the SLA's officers, like in the Sri Lanka Administrative Service. This frequently happens when a government changes. The officers who worked with the previous government, they're being sent to they were sent to indesignated places. Like they get their pay, but they don't have any designated work. So a lot of people go into stress, even though there's no work, they're highly stressed because they don't have the recognition. And some wise people turn this negative work situation into positive. I remember one time there was this SLA officer when he was transferred to Siberia, and he was just idling there, doing nothing. But being a smart person, he started studying. He did his external law degree. So this is how, when you face negative stress situations, sometimes you convert it into something productive. Every day we face personal stressors when we interact with people, when we interact with our family members, when we interact with our loved ones. So personal stresses generate. And socio-economic stresses. If you recall, 2-3 years ago, we had huge social problem. There was no electricity, there was no gas. So the entire communities, entire country was highly stressed. So family stresses could be individual and unique. It depends on the family dynamics and the financial situation and child rearing systems, etc. And culture can cause a lot of stresses, because in certain culture, so it affects the individual. Sometimes the culture clash, and I have often seen these when Sri Lankan families, they migrate to Canada or to Australia or to UK. Sometimes they can't cope up with the cultural stresses because it's a new environment. Their cultural upbringing is different. They expect certain cultural expectation for their children, and in the Western culture, it's somewhat different. And some families can't cope up, and the culture clash, culture lagging. So some people, after spending a year or two, they come back to Sri Lanka. So the culture can cause a lot of stresses, because culture can initiate a lot of stress factors, especially for women, especially for children, and gender roles, etc. And if you think of LGBT people in in our society. Still, they experience high stresses because still we have certain lack of empathy and lack of understanding. So, a person, LGBT person living in this part of the world, experiencing high amount of stresses. And obviously, we had to cope with political stresses in our own country and sometimes globally. And what happens if there's a huge armed conflict uh, in the Middle East, and it affects uh, us too, because it affects world trade, it affects the dollar rate fluctuation, and world politics, the political stresses naturally affect us. And there's another thing we have to understand, because loud noise can trigger stresses. In Sri Lanka, some of the religious institutions, they use the sound factor unnecessarily, starting from morning till night. They preach, we don't know whatever they preach, because through these loudspeakers, and it has become a huge burden, a huge nuisance to the population. Children can't study, people can't relax. So students can't study. And eventually what happens, there's a general tension, general irritability is being built up in the society, and it negatively affects the entire society. So the political legislators and the health experts should look into that, because noise pollution is a huge thing in our country, and we have to take measures against that. Now we see how to combat stress. So I'm not going to be very technical. Like, what are the simple measures to combat stress? 30 minutes of daily moderate exercise, because exercise is a good thing, because you move your body, and then your blood circulation is enhanced. And unlike if you're confined to your house, to your room, you see the monotony, you see the same thing over and over again. But you start moving, when you walk, you see the greenery, you see the outer environment. It gives you sort of happiness, and it reduces your stress factors. And mindfulness meditation, we spoke about meditation. There are about 200 types of meditation. The main rationale is bringing your the mind to the present moment, because when you are time traveling, when you're focused to your past or focused to your future, you become vulnerable. But when you focus to your present moment, you are encapsulated. You are in a very, very protective capsule. Stress, anxiety, depression can't harm you. So it's very essential that if you can focus to the present moment, if you're in a stress, tense situation, try to do breath meditation. And some people do progressive muscle relaxation, do yoga, exercises, swimming, and visualization. This is really good for some people. Like, you can close your eyes and imagine that you are in Copacabana, or you are in Sunset Boulevard. So see the scenery. You can see the beautiful environment. The imagery visualization can reduce your stress. And slow, deep breaths, because what happens in breath meditation, you give a lot of oxygen to your brain. Your brain is craving for oxygen. When the oxygen supply to your brain is stopped for about 5 to 7 minutes, your brain can die. So the brain is very sensitive to oxygen. When you do breath meditation, your body gets a lot of oxygen, and also it uses oxygen to create an optimal function. And also your mind is focused to the present moment. You are not going to that negative looping. You are not going to destructive thinking pattern. So you have the focus to your breathing. So that's why this breath meditation is It's simple and it's very, it gives a lot of promising results. Uh, Now we see what are the positive stress coping actions, turning stress into a challenge. When people are overwhelmed with stresses, sometimes they challenge the stresses. I see this in a lot of intern medical officers. When you start your internship, you are 24/7 confined to the hospital. You don't have any leave. You can't leave the hospital. So morning till night, you are working at the hospital, seeing patients, getting blackguarded by your consultant. And uh, for some people, it's a highly stressful thing. And they are unable to cope. So the advice we got was consider it as a challenge. So entire 1 year, you undergo this hectic training and consider it as a challenge, like a commando training. And you turn stress into a challenge. Sometimes you make a threatening situation less threatening. If the stress factors are sort of affecting you, it's sort of creating a threatening situation. Either you move away from that, either move away from that tense situation, so you are making the threatening situation less threatening. And sometimes you can change your goal, like you're a perfectionist and uh, you really want this object, or you really want this promotion. You think without this promotion, you are nowhere, you are unhappy. But in the meantime, you consider it's okay. Like the failures are okay. You can't be a winner all the time. Sometimes you have to experience failures. It's okay. Sometimes it's uh, when you face failures, you see different avenues. So you change your goals in your life, and sometimes it happens for good. I know a person, any change, any issue he faces, he thinks that it's everything happens for good. So that's a very good life philosophy. And taking physical action, like see a doctor, or do breath meditation, or do Tai Chi, or uh, if the stress is overwhelming, you can take medication. And the other important thing is prepare for stress before it happens. Anticipation is really good, especially when we work with soldiers. We realize that when the soldiers are in sort of threatening situation, they didn't know what's happening. So tension is built up. So the best thing is to prepare them before it happens. And you have to do certain debriefing for the soldiers. If you are working with students, you have to do debriefing. You can, when they have the imminent exam, imminent some project, imminent deadline, you can prepare for that before the stress factor hits you. So there are other stress management methods like relaxation training, meditation, physical exercises, aerobics. Balanced diet is very important because most of us, we are not getting a balanced diet. I would like to tell another clinical story. One time there were a group of children having ADHD type of behavior, and they were highly stressed, and they had some behavioral infractions. And when these children were referred, what we did, we gave them uh, vitamin B for 12 weeks. And after 12 weeks, we saw drastic change in their behavior. We didn't do any counseling, we didn't do any educational counseling or anything, any intervention, just change their nutrition. So sometimes giving them a balanced diet can reduce their internal stress factors. So imagery exercises, as I mentioned, like close your eyes, think that you are in a beautiful beach and you can hear the breeze. You can visualize the blue sky, etc. And sound therapy. Sound therapy is very important, and it can be used to heal a lot of stress conditions like Mozart's music and Tibetan meditational music, Baroque music, and it's a very powerful mode of therapy. Where sometimes people listen to music, healing music, until they fall asleep, and it's a very good sleep starter. So adapting a humor is very important because without humor, the life is very dry. And if we lack humor, and it's gonna be very tough facing day-to-day stresses in our life. Sometimes humor makes us sort of vulnerable to face the vulnerable, evade the vulnerable situation, and go and find a victory. So humor is a very, very powerful thing. And when you adopt humorous way of looking things, even in a disaster, sometimes some people find the point of humor there. So that's very important. And the healthy sleep is very, very essential because we don't get appropriate sleep, especially students, workers, mothers, they don't sleep. At least 7 to 8 hours sleep is important. If we don't sleep, then the following day we feel exhausted and that tension rises. And it could lead to a sort of vicious cycle. So we spoke about physical exercises and its importance, and the balanced diet, about the music therapy, the meditation. So this book, Clinical Meditation, I wrote a few years ago. It discusses meditation as a sort of a mode of psychological therapy, mode of psychotherapy, without considering religious or cultural boundaries. So meditation is a sort of uh, a mental technique, and you can use it to eliminate your stress, anxiety, and depression. So we spoke about humor and how to stay positive. And we have to change our negative life philosophy. Sometimes life philosophy itself creates stress inside you. Sometimes not the event, it's our interpretation causes stresses. Uh, I know of some people who are highly negative, and uh, these people, their own interpretation, everything happens, they have this negative interpretation, and it's mainly based on their life philosophy. So you have to change your life philosophy when you face uh, stress factors. Establishing healthy boundaries are essential because in our country, especially in Southeast Asian culture, we have boundary issues. Especially, we are not maintaining healthy boundaries within our family, within our neighbors, sometimes with our co-workers, etc. So, setting up boundaries are very important. Otherwise, what happens is we have to face numerous stresses. And maintain your internal happiness. See this picture. The outside world is ablazing. There's war going on, and you can see destruction and chaos. Can you change the environment? No, you can't change the outer environment, but you have the capability of changing your inner environment. See this old man, whatever happens, he doesn't give a damn about that. He's listening to his old music. So this is how they face stresses. Like sometimes things you can't change, but you can change your inner interpretation. This is a very, very powerful picture. Stress management can help by removing or changing the source of stress, altering how a person views a stressful event, lowering the effects that stress might have on the body, learning alternative ways of coping. and keep a stress journal and write about your thoughts, write about your negative things. If you face work-related harassments, write about that. Sometimes you can't change. You can't change an idiotic boss. Like he's a nasty guy by nature, so you can't change it. Sometimes you don't have the ability to stand up, but at least you can maintain a stress journal. You can write about whatever the negativity. Sometimes whatever the stresses arising within your family from the outside, even the cultural stresses. Remember Anne Frank? She had to live for a number of years in a small room with her family and other family friends. So it was a very, very stressful situation, and she couldn't escape. And so her only uh, escape mode was keeping keeping up her journal. So she started writing her journal. Later, it became very prominent. Anne Frank's diary. Even though the story was traumatic, they were found by the Nazis and they were sent to concentration camp, and there Anne Frank and her sister perished. It's a sad story, but I'm not focusing on to this the tragic story, but my main focus is about the stress journal that for nearly 2 years she survived. She survived, and she was hiding, and she was able to maintain some mental sanity doing this journal. Art therapy is very important. We have done this art therapy with soldiers sometimes. This is by one of the soldiers who participated in the battle event in Operation Ranagosa. He's a post-traumatic stress patient. He has flashbacks, nightmares. So this is his vivid dream and his flashback about the battlefield. He sees people fight, and he sees his friends are dead, and he see the enemy is advancing, etc. So sometimes your distressing mental images you can convert into art, and it's an aesthetic way of expressing your inner thoughts. Sometimes if you're not articulate, if you're unable to write, sometimes you can do it in a form of art. See this picture. A big fish is coming to attack a man in a boat, like a fisherman. So this drawing by an 8-year-old child whose father died during operation. So the child endured paternal deprivation, and he was facing stress and anxiety, especially separation anxiety. This is how he figured the father's death. A big fish is coming to attack his father. So still his mental image, his inner thoughts, his inner stress-related image is about father's death. This is how the child was able to gain form of catharsis drawing this picture. So let us talk about managing stresses again, like getting regular physical activity, participating in relaxation techniques such as sleep, breathing, meditation, yoga, tai chi, or massage therapy. Sometimes massage therapy is important when you have muscle tension, sometimes neck tension, neck pain, headache, and keeping a sense of humor, we discussed, and spending time with family and friends. We often forget that because when we are overwhelmed with work and stresses, we neglect. Sometimes we hardly talk to our family members or friends. We go into isolation. A lot of people go into limbo. They go into alienation without having any social connections. Social connections are very, very healthy when you face stresses. And if you start a hobby, even though you are experiencing stresses like reading a book or listening to music, horticulture. So there are, you name it, there are a lot of hobbies to evade stress factors. Sometimes you derive satisfaction doing engage in some pleasant work. So we said therapy, music, time management, nature, yoga, meditation, etc. Are important when dealing with stresses. Time management, we didn't talk about much because if we do time management, we can evade a lot of stresses, especially the workers. They have a lot of workload and sometimes they do procrastination. Uh, because if they do time management, then the tension is less. Then they can go, like the going is easy. Otherwise, what happens is sort of work is accumulating and eventually they find it difficult to function and they don't know where to start and where to end. Same thing goes to the school children who are studying for an exam, or the university students uh, who do their semesters or assignments. Sometimes they forget to do this time management and they do everything in the final week, and it's like it's a very, very stress generating and overwhelming feeling. So we spoke about mindfulness, the movement, positive thinking, self-care, because we forget to do self-care. Now, in most of the families, mothers are very, very loving. They look after their family, look after their children, but they forget to look after themselves. So self-care is very important in this part of the world, especially elderly and especially women. They forget self-care because they think it's a sort of very individualistic or very selfish thing. No, it's not a selfish thing. You have to look after yourself and maintain healthy boundaries, because in our society, lack of self-care and inability to maintain boundaries, we fall into a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and eventually we are sort of suffering from unnecessary and unwanted stresses. Here I want to list a few professional techniques. So I'm not going to be very technical about these things. Like as professionals, we do biofeedback, critical incident stress debriefing, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a very powerful mode of psychotherapy, cognitive behavior therapy, therapeutic relaxation, psychological counseling, and meditation. So that ends up my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention. So if you have any questions, kindly email it to me. I'm happy to give whatever the answers possible. So one more time, thank you very much, and we'll meet in our next session. Thank you.